Dylan Reynolds with Space Co. 3850 Prairie West South Drive, Suite 110, Indianapolis. Civil engineer on the project. Just want to thank everybody for entertaining this one time here to get hopefully get this patio changed approved. So I don't really have much more to add than what Bill already mentioned, but happy to answer any questions.
The only other question is, we still have enough parking spaces.
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
We're going to do public comment. So we'll open public comment at 6:44. Anybody sign to speak?
No one signed up for this petition.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up and speak on this petition? Seeing none, then we'll close the public comment at 6:45. So deliberations on GPR 2301.
I have no concerns about this proposed amendment.
I move that we approve DPR 23-01 Harvest Landing Lot 4, and amend it to an approved development plan review to provide for an outdoor eating area and removal of parking
Good afternoon, Brian Emmerich. I'm with Allegro Civil Engineers, 4322 North Lincoln Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Appreciate all your time this evening. I don't have much to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So I do have a question. And Bill, if you could put the layout up there again, please. So if you'd look at the drive-through lanes, notice are those 2 drive-through lanes or just 1?
So it's one, the inner lane is a drive-through lane with an ATM service. The outer lane is a bypass lane for anyone that queues up and decides they no longer want to use the ATM. They have the option to not wait in that line and bypass and exit.
So the question about the 8.5 feet wide, being able to accommodate vehicles, can you help us with that?
I can, yeah. So this is the bank standard. Obviously, they have experience nationwide with this, and they found that 8.5 feet is the sweet spot where you, just as Bill mentioned, you don't have to get in that awkward situation where you open the door and are a little bit too far away to access the ATM. It is 12 feet before you get under canopy, and again, after you exit. And what separates the bypass lane from the drive-through ATM lane is a 6-inch monolithic curb.
Sorry, that curb is the exit. So are you coming from the bottom of the image and up and out, or are you coming from the top and going down?
So plan south, or the bottom is where you enter, and then you exit at the top.
Okay, so when you're exiting, you have a longer buffer before turning out?
I'm not sure what you mean by buffer, but
Well, the curb runs longer, so you can't, is that what you're saying?
correct. The curb when you're exiting the drive-through lane on your right-hand side would extend all the way until the front face of that building.
Got it, thanks.
So really the only impact is to the user going to the ATM or whatever.
Correct.
Any other questions for the
Based
petitioner?
on just one last question. Based on your history then, that you said that you do this, throughout the country, any accident reports or anything like that from your customers?
Yeah, so this is the configuration that leads to the fewest accidents we found.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll open up for public comment then.
Thank you.
Approximately 6:53. Is there anybody signed up for this?
No one has signed up.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up and talk to this case? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, 6:53. So comments, questions?
I'd just like to say I'm appreciative of the petitioner listening at the last meeting and redesigning to meet this unified development ordinance. So that's a good
I
thing.
agree.
It's uncommon.
So we have a waiver along with this petition. So there any other comments on the petition or on the waiver? Would anybody like to make a motion on the waiver?
I would move that we approve the waiver request of section 6.12B2 to allow for drive-through lanes with a width of 8.5 feet, subject to no conditions.
Second.
Motion and second. Can we have a roll call vote?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Craig Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries. The waiver is approved.
Thank you. Can we have any comments on the petition itself? Or a motion on the petition?
I move that we approve DPR 23-02 Bank of America Avon, a development plan review to allow for the development of a 4,240 square foot single-story financial center branch with drive-up service lanes, subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26, 2023 Plan Commission presentation. since it has satisfied all the requirements for development plan review under state law and is subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion passes 6-0. The development plan is approved.
DPR 2302 and waiver passes. Thank you. Move on to DPR 2305.
DPR 2305, Avon Marketplace Surgery Center. This is a request for approval of a development plan to construct a surgery center. It's a 2.96 acre property located in tiers 2 and 3 of the US 36 overlay district in zone C2. It's lot 4C of lot 4A of Avon Marketplace. Significant history on this little Avon Marketplace, started in 2007 and has had several development plan petitions filed and approved in it. Most recent one being the surgery center to the north of this vacant or unimproved property. This is the property right here. There's a surgery center. There's a sort of a daycare center / school up here. There was a hotel approved for this particular piece of property, although it's never gone forward and been developed yet. And then this piece of property sort of ekes over into this one as well. And this is really for future development, but I believe there's some parking on that property. As I said, it's a request for a surgery center on this lot. Property is zoned C2 and in tier 3 and it's got a small section on the northern part of it that's in tier 2, but the vast majority of this property is in tier 3 of the overlay district. The request that you have before you is consistent with the requirements of the UDO, except that the building along its north property line doesn't meet the setback. The property line does a 90-degree jog up there. And so because of that jog, it had a setback encroachment, but the Board of Zoning Appeals had heard and approved variance request for that deviation from the ordinance at its March meeting. This is the site landscaping plan showing right up here basically is where the deviation for the setback requirement is, where the lot line sort of does a 90-degree to the south. And this is the line of parking that's located on that sort of adjacent lot over here. This are renderings of the proposed building. All of it meets the overlay district requirements. And so we do recommend approval of DPR 2305, the Avon Marketplace Surgery Center, subject to the 4 conditions outlined up there on the plan or on the staff's presentation. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for staff?
Bill, can you go back to your initial? Very back to the show. Okay. So the spine center there is on the right. It's that building there?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're behind it then.
Right. They'll be south of that surgery center right there. Where that spine center.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
What's that? Oh. We do have a change. Condition 3, Crossroad Engineers is the design engineer on this particular problem, on this particular development. So this needs to be banning engineer. So 3 should read, the development shall comply with all relevant portions of the town code and comments by Public Works, the fire department, and banning engineering at the pre-construction meeting.
Okay, they just can't represent themselves.
Right. Crossroad is our design consultant, but when they're the actual designer of the site, we go with banning.
Okay. Any other questions for staff at this time?
I have one.
Yes.
Bill, if Some of the parking's on the other lot. If that's developed, will they still have enough parking for this?
Yeah, they have enough parking. That's sort of an overflow parking lot. I think the intention is to put a small medical building on that site at some future time, and then they'll redesign that parking. But yeah, they have sufficient parking on the actual building where they don't necessarily need those two according to the order, that line of parking according to the ordinance.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll ask the petitioner come forward. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Brady Vaughn with Crossroad Engineers, 115 North 17th Avenue, Beech Grove. Bill pretty much covered everything that I could have brought up. As he said, this is at Avon Marketplace in Kingston Street in that northwest corner. It's a 20,000 square foot surgery center, new storm sewer, waters, sanitary electrical connections, landscaping and sidewalk. As Bill said, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved the variance for the setback. Otherwise, we meet all the development standards, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Any questions for the petitioner? Okay, well, see none at this time. We'll open up for public comment, 7:02. No? Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come forward and speak on this case? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, 7:03. Open up for discussion by the commissioners. Comments? Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. I think the development makes sense for this area. Again, it's consistent with the overlay district, so that's good to see.
I agree with the staff report. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve DPR 23-05 Avon Marketplace Surgery Center, a development plan review to construct a surgery center subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26, 2023 Plan Commission presentation, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second.
So just a matter of record, do we need to make note of banning engineering in the motion? Or did we bring that up during the conversation? Good enough.
The motion is to approve the conditions as presented, then you're fine.
Okay.
And that's how I heard it.
Okay. All right. Could we have a roll call vote?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries 6-0. The development plan is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's move on to DPR 2307.
DPR 2307, 7 Brew at Stanfield Crossing. This is a request for approval of development plan review to approve a 750 square foot coffee shop with a drive-through lane located in Tier 1 of the US 36 Overlay District. It's about an 8,707 acre property located at 6883 East US Highway 36, or Lot 2 in Stanfield Crossing. This is the history of it, starting with a subdivision request in 2022 and going through now. And you add on this, the Bank of America that you'd previously heard at this meeting right here. As you can see that this is the site again. The Bank of America was right here, Taco Bell right here, gasoline service station here, Kroger Shopping Center to the north. There will be a access point from Stanfield Crossing. It'll come in through this way and exit out here on 267, or I'm sorry, Avon Avenue. But they'll gain direct access out here on US 36. It is a request for approval of a development plan for a 750 square foot coffee shop. 750 square feet is the smallest building that's permitted in the C2 zoning district. And in Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 overlay. The request is consistent with the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance, with the exception of the signage requests. And the signage that they propose on these elevations that you're going to see exceeds the permitted number and the size. The petitioner is aware of it, and we've talked about it. That deviation is not something the Plan Commission can approve through a waiver process. It has to be something that the Board of Zoning Appeals that approves through a variance process. But we typically handle signage through a permitting process, so it's perfectly fine if you all approve this development plan, even though the elevations that you're going to see have more signs of what's permitted by the ordinance. There was a special exception on this particular piece of property for a drive-through. That was heard in February of this year, and the Board of Zoning Appeals did approve that particular request. This is the site. As you can see, the access straight through here, Bank of America petition right here, comes in, does a 90, and then heads out through that shopping center or to that little integrated center that has the gasoline service station out to Avon Avenue.
That's where it comes out right now by the house that we own.
Right. Yeah. These are the elevations. The elevations are consistent with the requirements of the ordinance. The building's clad in brick, masonry painted in a sort of a grayish and blue colors. This sign alone complies with the ordinance requirements. It's when you add these two and then the next one right here. These are the signs that we're talking about, that usually the signs on the side facades. Under the ordinance, uses in the C2 zoning districts are allowed 2. And it's basically the size constraint is the width of the building along the US 36 frontage. So they have a fairly small allowance. They could put a second sign. They could delete the 2 signs on the side and put a second sign on one of the sides, but it would have to be fairly small. In this particular case, again, other than the signage, we do recommend approval of this particular petition and subject to those 4 conditions outlined in the presentation here. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So Bill, just make sure as we're considering this petition, the signage is not something that we really need to consider at this time. That was informational.
Yeah, so by ordinance, you can review the signage, but then when you review the signage, it has to comply with the requirements of the ordinance. What we tend to see is that we don't see signage on a petition because a lot of times we don't have a tenant. So we defer review of signage to the permitting process. When signage is shown, we do a quick review of it to see if it complies with the ordinance, and then we inform the petitioner whether what they propose is consistent with the ordinance or inconsistent with the ordinance. And we tell them, the Plan Commission can approve this petition. They won't be able to approve the signage that you show. You'll have to go to BZA to get a variance if you want this signage, or you could just redesign the signs to comply with the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, if not, would the petitioner come forward? Please say your name and address for the record.
Thank you and good evening, Plan Commission members. Joe Calder at 11 South Meridian, Indianapolis. This is the first of perhaps 2 7 brews for Avon. There's another one planned that is tracking a little bit behind this one. As mentioned, this is the second lot in Stanfield Crossing that you're considering tonight. 7 Brew is pretty excited about being here. It's a new concept. They're open in Plainfield. That's the closest one, south side of Indy. We're going to Muncie Thursday evening, 2 open in Lafayette. So they're coming to town, and they've gotten quite a following since they have started their expansion up to these parts. So the history that I just wanted to let you know, we had a very robust TAC meeting, and fortunately the design team came up with a revised set of plans that really address the concerns that your staff had, both on the civil side and particular thanks to Greg Elko for his patience in reviewing drainage plans. We got his letter June 15th, but we went back and we complied with the architectural standards. We already had the special exception for drive-through and wanted to make sure we hit all the setbacks and those other requirements. So with that being said, I think we're comfortable with the conditions imposed. We've not made a decision. I'm waiting to hear from the design team as to what they want to do about the sign package. We'll either comply or seek a variance from the BZA, but happy to answer any additional questions you might have tonight.
Any questions for the petitioner?
Question I have, you did mention there is one in Plainfield. When I went by there, is this the same footprint as the Plainfield one?
Yeah. Plainfield might be a little smaller. We beefed up the size here to meet because the overlay does have a minimum square footage. They're typically 600 feet. We moved it up to 750 in this case to meet the minimum size standards. So I'm not exactly sure of the size. It's certainly, this is not going to be smaller.
Is this drive-through only then?
Yeah, and they do have a walk-up window type of scenario. So yeah.
Any other questions? See none. Thank you. We'll open up
Thank
for
you.
public comment at 7:12.
We have no one signed up for public comment.
Okay, no one signed up. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up and speak on this petition? We do have one. If you would state your name and address for the record.
Brady Oring, 1308 North County Road 600 East, Avon. I'm just curious if there's access to the westbound US 36 from the property.
So you're talking about if there's a left turn into that property?
Yeah, it looked like there was access heading east towards 267. Was there access to the light by Taco Bell or anywhere else to head west?
So we'll take that question. So this is for comments, but that question's noted and that'll come up in discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? And we'll close public comment at 7:14. So Bill, that's
No.
a good question.
No, we won't break the median on US 36, so there'll be no left-hand turn out of this site. So it's right in, right out along US 36. We are actually going to extend the median on Avon Avenue down past the site as well. So anybody that wants to leave this site and go westbound on US 36 is going to have to do a right-hand turn on Avon Avenue, go around the roundabout and come back up to make a left-hand turn on 36 that way.
Okay, so just to be clear then, anybody westbound on 36 will not be able to do a left turn into the property.
No, they won't be able to do a left-hand. You won't be able to be a left-hand turn out of the property. It's going to be right in, right out on 36 and essentially right in, right out on Avon Avenue. So if you want to go westbound or northbound on Avon Avenue or westbound on 36, you're gonna have to go all the way down to the roundabout and swing around and come back up.
Okay, thank you.
And then you said there's a median that when you're in, you cannot go west past the bank or past Taco Bell to get back to the stoplight. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You might be able to cut through the school property to get to.
Don't tell
We
people.
won't talk about that.
Well, I'm trying to think through it, but
Any other comments from the commissioners on the case?
Just one last, how does this compare to Ziggy's that's down on Dan Jones?
well, Ziggy's was a little bit bigger. Ziggy's was bigger. They're similar. I think Ziggy's was like 1,000 or 1,100 square feet.
Okay.
And I think it had a larger menu too. I think Ziggy's does. But as far as operations, it's similar because I don't think Ziggy's has any indoor operations either. They operate the same way. That's through a drive-through, and they have a walk-up window as well.
So last question then, on the walk-up window, we have enough parking spaces?
Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is there an outdoor seating area?
I don't think so. I think that they are predominantly, I don't think so. I think they are predominantly a drive-through service. I think that's what, like 90% of their
So
business
the walk-up
is.
window is more for just picking up, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Ziggy's has a small outdoor area, so I was wondering.
Yeah, Ziggy's, they designed, so that's not sort of a standard design. The franchisee designed that building themselves. And they designed it to try to capture some of the walking traffic that was going on the trail. So the reason it's bigger and the reason it has a walk-up window is because the owners of Ziggy's actually designed it specifically to try to capture walking traffic that happens along the trail and the parks in that area.
Oh, nice, thank you.
Okay. There's no other comments. We'll entertain a motion.
I'll do it. I move that we approve DPR 23077 Brew at Stanfield, a development plan review to allow for the development of a 750 square foot coffee shop with drive-through, subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting presentations, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Paul Guckenberger,
For.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
For,
Motion passes. The development plan is approved 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business 23, DPR 2309.
DPR 2309, Avon Landing Industrial Building Number 2. This is a request for approval of the development plan review to approve a 245,240 square foot warehouse with a waiver of section 2412.3 of the old zoning ordinance. And I just have to bring this up because this is in a planned unit development. The planned unit development references the old zoning ordinance, which is why the old zoning ordinance was used to review this petition. To provide for the construction of a building without the required plane projections or recesses and substantial variation in massing, including height changes and projecting and recessing elements. It's a 20-acre parcel located approximately 2580 Logistics Way. History of this property, the Avon Landing Plan Unit Development is the old Speedway Airport up on north on Ronald Reagan, right at the extent essentially of the town's corporate limits. This petition, the Avon Landing PUD was approved in 2015, and then this property was subdivided approximately 20 or about 2 years ago. And then there have been 3 development proposals approved within the Avon Landing Plan Unit Development right now. One of them is a multifamily residential complex. The second one was an electrical substation, which was constructed on 900. And then the final one was the first building in the Avon Landing industrial property. This is the site right here on the north side of this Logistics Way right here. As you can see, the B&O trail, I believe, is right up here. And I think that this right here is the first building that was constructed in the Avon Landing Plan Unit Development. This right here is the Avon Landing apartment complex under construction. They actually may be through construction and occupied right now. It is a request for development plan approval to construct a 245,000 square foot building for speculative occupancy for logistics and warehouses land uses. No distinct land use is currently known for the building from the staff's perspective, so we don't have any way of telling you exactly what's going to go in there. But the property is located in the industrial portion of the Avon Landing PUD. And that PUD references the old zoning ordinance. So when we reviewed it, we used the old zoning ordinance for the standards for this particular planned unit development. The request does include a waiver of the old ordinance's building articulation requirements. When the Ronald Reagan corridor overlay was first sort of envisioned, what people saw, it was basically a joint effort by Hendricks County, Avon, Plainfield, and Brownsburg to sort of come up with a coordinated scheme along the Ronald Reagan corridor or Ronald Reagan Parkway, and to encourage land uses such as higher end office or a corporate headquarters. As the land uses have matured, and the land uses have matured from south to north along the corridor, what we've found is that instead of getting that land use mix of corporate headquarters and office uses, high concept office uses, that we were getting warehousing and logistics land uses. And so as development has occurred along the corridor, nearly every land use has requested especially the ones dealing with warehousing and logistics, has requested a waiver of this configuration, this requirement to articulate the building and change the height of the building, because these are basically tilt-up concrete panel or cast-in-place concrete panel buildings, and they don't really articulate like that. The petitioner has filed findings of fact in support of the waiver request. The only other issue that we have on this one really is the ordinance does require that loading docks be screened from view from the corridor street from the Ronald Reagan Parkway. And the current landscape plan shows deciduous trees along the northeast part of the corridor, which obviously during the fall would not screen those docks from view from the Ronald Reagan corridor, or at least break up the view from the corridor. And so we've talked to the petitioner about changing some of those trees along that stretch to evergreen trees, so it's got a year-round screening for those truck docks from the parkway. And the petitioner has agreed to submit a revised landscape plan when we get to pre-filing or the pre-construction meeting. This is the site, and this area right here is the area we're talking about. There's probably about 11 or 12 deciduous trees in here that we would want to switch those out to evergreen trees. But the rest of the site is consistent with the requirements of the landscape ordinance and the development standards and land uses of the Avon Landing Plan Unit development. The building itself, what you're seeing on these two, or what it's going to be viewed, how it's going to be viewed from the corridor, which I believe is from this area right here, and how it's going to be viewed on the south elevation right here. The west elevation is right here, which will be internal to the plan unit development, and then this will be the north elevation, which is the line of truck docks that you see, and that's what you would see heading southbound on Ronald Reagan. And that's the area that we would like screened a little bit better along the parkway.
With those docks, do they run parallel with the trail?
They do. Well, the trail goes like this, but they are.
Okay.
These are the docks right here, and then the trail is right here. So in this particular instance, we have a recommendation of approval of this development plan review petition. We do recommend approval of the waiver as outlined in the staff report on file, and we do recommend approval of the DPR subject to 5 conditions. The first one being an amendment to the landscape plan to replace the deciduous trees along the northeastern portion of the site with evergreen trees to ensure that the loading docks are screened from the Ronald Reagan Parkway. The other 4 are the standard conditions of approval of development plan review petition. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Bill, can you go back 2 or 3 slides to the side renderings? Is there a way to, so one of the waivers is, well, the waiver is about articulation, right?
Right.
Is there a way for these types of construction to give the appearance of articulation through paint jobs or something other than it just being a flat contiguous surface?
So in this area, I believe this area, there is some, and you see that there is on the parkway, they've gone and they've stepped down the roof.
Right.
You know, so they've done, and these are articulated parts. So they do extend out from the face of the building. They just don't extend out from the face with the ordinance requires, I think, a 30% articulation. So it ends up being something in the neighborhood of almost 10, 12 feet for something this long. And because of that, they have some articulation into the building. It's just not what the minimum the ordinance requires.
Okay. And so that top rendering is the north side, is that right? Or the east side?
This right here is the east side. This was the side that's going to face the parkway.
Okay. And then can you show us the side that'd be facing north, which is along the
north side is going to be the truck docks right here.
Okay. That's the one that gives me, I wonder if they can't do something with the articulation. Again, just give us some sort of visual appearance of articulation. But again, that could be a question I can ask the petitioner.
Yeah, I don't, that would be the petitioner. Yeah, I don't know if they can or not.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff?
Oh, I guess I do have questions. So that north side, would that have been, is articulation required for the north side?
Yeah, there's an exhibit that a petitioner had submitted, and I probably should dig it out of one of the old files. And it really has a building that's articulated pretty heavy. You know, it's literally like 20-foot articulation into a building like this. And I probably should have dug it out. It wasn't this petitioner. It was a petitioner about a year and a half ago along the Reagan Logistics property. He asked for they asked for similar waivers, and they showed what the ordinance would require them to build. And it makes sense when you're dealing with or relatively small office buildings, but once you start getting into 250,000 and million square foot buildings, it becomes really difficult to put those articulations into the building by ordinance standards anyway.
Thanks.
Any other questions? If not, then we'll ask the petitioner to come forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yep. Good evening. Thank you. My name is Kylie Bright-Schuler with American Structure Point at 9025 River Road, Suite 200, Indianapolis, Indiana. Yeah, Bill pretty much covered it all, but I wanted to note on the landscape problem. I think it was just, I talked to the landscape architect and it was just a issue with their key. They labeled it wrong, so it was actually supposed to be evergreens and not deciduous trees. Additionally, along Ronald Reagan, we have a berm there, so the trees will go along the berm, further sheltering it from view of the road there. And then to address kind of your issue with along B&O Trail with the truck court area. I'm not an architect, but explaining it, I guess, in civil engineering terms, the width of the drive aisles for the truck courts, if you were to get that variation in depth, trucks couldn't pull in exactly how they're needed to. But the landscape plan does have trees along B&O Trail as well. And I think it's a substantial difference from the truck court itself. That's all I have.
Any questions for the petitioner?
Could you talk to us more then about that tree buffer then between the B&O Trail and the docks? Like, is there going to be a mound of dirt with trees, or can you talk to us more about that?
Yeah, we didn't have any bermage in that area, but it's the building and then 80 feet, and then I think another 80 feet. If you could pull up the plan. But I know the trees border the trail and not the actual parking itself, as you can see there. And I think there is actually a good mix of deciduous and evergreen trees as well. Oh, thanks. Yeah, along here.
So those are new trees, not existing trees that you would install?
Yep, new trees. And the berm actually does extend around this side too. So that'll be kind of sheltered from the low part of the trail here. Really, when you're walking on this trail down here, you won't be able to see up here with the elevation difference.
Thanks.
What about the truck flow, the traffic flow around the building? I know the building to the west that is completed. There's that road, and I think it flows all the way around that building.
Yep.
Is
So
it the same?
Yep, this road is Logistics Way, and that connects all three with the cul-de-sac down here. You'll be able to access all three buildings, and then there's a shared drive in the middle as well that also ties into Logistics Way. So there should be flow in and out here pretty easily.
Okay, I see it up there.
Yep,
Okay.
this one.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you. At this time, then we'll open up for public comment at 7:31.
No one is signed up to speak.
Is there anybody from the audience that would like to come forward and talk to this case? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, 7:31. Deliberations by the commission. So we have a waiver and a petition.
My only question, probably not for the building itself, but for the intersection there, is there a stoplight going in there? Similar to what we have down south on Ronald Reagan?
Yeah. Yeah, there would be a stoplight at that location.
And it'll probably go in once these apartments start to be rented out and.
I believe that the infrastructure is in. I don't know if the light itself is hung. But yeah, as soon as it meets warrants, we'll turn on a light.
Right,
We'll
okay.
have a light installed and turn it on there. Thank you.
Any comments about the waiver on the articulation? Yeah, I think Mason, you pointed out that it's really the north side is where there's a lack of articulation.
Yeah, and the petitioner, that the case they presented makes sense from just a feasibility standpoint. And so to the landscaping, like if that, I think if the group, well, we all vote individually, but that would be my one, question is whether the landscaping is sufficient to provide enough visual buffer between B and O, right? That's a great resource, and the warehouse. Yeah, that was my only concern. I'm okay with lack of articulation as long as there was adequate landscaping.
So Bill, to that, not being able to, I don't have the paper copy here, but looking at the trees that are on the B&O, is there enough mix there that once they're fully mature, it'll provide a good screenage there?
Yeah, it'll screen. Obviously, the intent there is sort of breaking up. We're not going to block the total view, right? You're going to be able to see through between the trees and that stuff. So it's when they mature there, you will get that. And like the petitioner indicated, there's a berm there, and so when you're walking on it, it might be. I think it's a 6 foot or 8 foot berm at this location. So you probably aren't going to be able to see the building as you're walking on the trail.
Right, but the berm doesn't go the entire length of the trail. It just goes on the east end there, so, okay. Could you come up to the podium, please?
I just wanted to note something as well. The kind of scalloped line that you see north along Beano Trail, that's existing vegetation. So that's all staying. And then what we're lining that trail with is just additional. So there already is very good coverage, but we're adding further screening.
Thank you for that additional information.
Yep.
Any other comments on the petition? And is there a motion on the waiver?
I move that we approve the waiver request of section 24-12.3 of the old zoning ordinance to provide for the construction of the building without the required plane projections or recesses and substantial variation in massing, including height changes and projecting and recessing elements, subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26, 2023 Plan Commission meeting.
I'll second.
Had a motion and a second on the waiver. Roll call vote.
Paul Guckenberger.
Or
Bill Reed.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Mason Pike.
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries. The waiver is approved 6-0.
okay, waiver is approved. Is there a motion on the DPR?
I move that we approve DPR 23-09 Avon Landing Industrial Building Number 2. Development plan review to provide for the development of a 245,240 square foot warehouse subject to the conditions proposed by the staff within the June 26, 2023 Plan Commission meeting presentation, since it has satisfied all the requirements for development plan review under state law and subject to the approval by
A second.
A motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Paul Guckenberger.
4.
Bill Reed.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Mason Pike.
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries. The development plan is approved 6-0.
Thank you. And moving on to DPR. Well, let me stop here. Does anybody need a break? It's only been an hour, but we'll continue. Moving on, DPR 2310.
DPR 2310 Avon Business Park. This is a request for approval of development plan review to approve 6 new flex industrial building of 12,000 square foot each for a total of 72,000 square feet of flex industrial space. It's a 5.2 acre property located at 8360 Kingston Street with 4 waivers. Waiver A of UDO section 2.1003A 7.11D to request to use canopies and unit colors in place of building articulation. Waiver B, UDO 2.1002C, request to allow relief from 2 different materials on the building facades. Waiver C, UDO 2.1002B, request to use metal panels and masonry on the building facades. And UDO 2.1002A, request to allow modification of masonry percentages on some of the building facades. There's no history on this. This is a piece of property on Kingston Street. Right here, it's Kingston, the railroads down here. It's located in 2 and 3, tiers 2 and 3 of the overlay. The tier line goes right about through here. So up here, it's tier 2. Up here, it's down here, it's tier 3.
So what's across the street right now?
It's undeveloped. There's like a little building right back here.
That's the one with, okay, it's off the road and it's got like the
Little gravel lot in front of it.
gravel lot and it's got a phone line, transmission tower
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah. As you said, this is a request for approval to construct 6 12,000 square foot buildings. And it's flex space for industrial occupancy. And the land use is most consistent with what if you remember on Ronald Reagan Parkway, there was a Rise development there that had about 16, 18 buildings. It's similar land use to that. Each of these buildings is broken up into, I think, 4, 5, 6 different tenant spaces. And so tenants can come in and rent these spaces, have a little office, a little restroom, and a little overhead door to operate their business out of this site. It does include waivers of relief from 4 standards of the architectural requirements of the US 36 overlay. The petitioner has submitted findings in support of those deviations. The staff has concurred with the petitioner's assessments of their requirements or their waiver requests. And if those waivers are approved, the request would meet all the requirements of the UDO. This is how the site is proposed to be laid out, with the 6 buildings starting out here at Kingston Street, and then each of these 12,000 square foot buildings, then again broken down into different tenant spaces, so that the petitioner can come in here, or a contractor use or something can operate out of a little business here. What you generally see is these are move-ups from people that are operating from their home. Their business has gotten to the point where it's too big to operate from their home anymore, but not big enough where they can have their own purpose-built building. So it becomes a transitional space for people to operate out of. Here's the buildings, what they look like, the front elevations here. This is the back elevations that would front. There's actually in the file sort of two different back elevations. There's one back elevation that looks like this that would front on Kingston, and then there's a back elevation that looks very similar to the color scheme that you see on this one that is shows the back of it. And you'll see what I mean when I get to the overhead rendering the petitioner has submitted. And then these are the backs of the buildings as they extend north into the development. So these are the backs of the buildings that you would be oriented away from Kingston Street. And these are the metal build. This is the metal seam siding that is being used on these particular buildings. And that is one of the waivers, because the ordinance would require it to be a certain percentage of masonry all the way around the building. So these are side elevations as they are shown in the building that meet the standards of the ordinance with the masonry wainscoting right here. And then these sides of the buildings are oriented to the outsides of the buildings, but not visible, say from Kingston Street or US 36. And this is a rendering of how the site would look built out. And this is what I mean by the rear elevations. So the building's front to this courtyard right here. And then the overhead doors are oriented this way. And so what the petitioner's done is give sort of a front-like facade along these facades as it orients on Kingston Street, and then orient the buildings, the visible portions of the building towards Kingston Street. And then the metal is, I believe, here and the backs of these and these right here. So where you can view this from the exterior, you would view it essentially consistent with the ordinance requirements. But if you were internal to the development, that's where the deviations from the ordinance, the architectural standards required. And then, of course, there's the articulation. All the buildings are rectangular, and there's no articulation in these proposed buildings. We do recommend approval of the waivers and of the DPR. The 4 standard conditions that we have on all of our DPR petitions, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for staff?
Hey, Bill, so the north side, is that the north side where you would see the metal paneling?
Yeah, north side right along here. These would be metal. Now, there's some landscaping that would break that up, and I don't believe that this site currently is developed. I think this site is vacant right now.
And then, so then north of that vacant lot, is that immediately US 36, or is there another?
So tier 2 goes right here. So that's basically 600 feet from 36, which is the tier 2 line goes right here. So all of tier 2, you probably got about 600 feet from this point here to get to 36.
Okay.
So is the way the ordinance set up that if you have any part of a property in a tier, then the higher the tier requirements applied to the entire property. So tier 2 requirements apply to the entire piece of property.
Well, what I have interpreted it as is that these would require to comply with tier 2, but then these, because the tier line goes basically right down the middle of this parking area right here. So these would comply with tier 3 and these would comply with tier 2.
Okay, so I'm guessing I'm going to ask Stan to weigh in on this, because we had a case once where we had a piece of property was in tier 1 and tier 2, and they had to conform to the tier 1 requirements.
That's the way your planner interpreted it at the time. So Bill's interpreted it differently,
Okay,
and he is the law until somebody says he's.
okay, I just want to make sure of that.
It's
So-
true, he's the law. It's his job to.
Okay.
Technically,
I do have a question on the south side of the building that faces Kingston Street. Is that brick there, did you say?
Pardon me?
The south side of these on the Kingston Street, is that brick?
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Kingston Street right here.
And is that brick on those buildings?
Yes, it's all brick. So it's, so the way the ordinance is written, they have brick here. These are all fronted with 100% masonry. The ordinance requires two different types of masonry.
Yes.
So it would be like a brick and a limestone, or brick and different color brick or something like that, you know? So what they've proposed is one style of brick along these frontages, but they're painted differently. Rather than have two different, like a brick or a limestone or a different material.
Okay, so what I'm asking is that on those two buildings that have their backs to Kingston Street, they're making them give a kind of a frontage look because they're frontage property. The two north buildings that have their backs going north, as you said, are metal panels there.
Right, that's the metal siding.
That's the one where I guess what I'm looking at is that it has potential sight from 36.
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
while
mean,
there's a undeveloped field north of that in the Enterprise car lot, that's still, I don't know how far it is from 36. It just, again, something for us to consider.
yeah, it would have, at least temporarily, probably some visibility from 36 until this site gets developed. And then the visibility would be blocked off.
But
from
yeah,
a
but
development.
the visibility would be to the tenant that's there though.
Right.
Is the metal painted or is it just gray color?
I believe it's gray. But yeah, it's painted, but it's painted gray. It's painted a grayish color.
Go back to your,
Which is no different than the steel panels on Andy Moore, for example. Those are steel panels, the white, that you see there.
can you go back to your rendering there? Is there any reason why, I know that the first four buildings face each other. Why can't you flip it around and put the vehicles or what on, so you see it on Kingston Street? Because right now, is that going to be loading docks on the back of Kingston Street or not, or any access?
I think it's just has emergency egress doors fronting on Kingston Street. So these are emergency egress doors from the individual tenant spaces. And that's what you would see from Kingston.
Wouldn't it be more aesthetically pleasing to have it flipped the other way? At least in my opinion. Go back to your other one.
From a curb appeal standpoint, I think.
That's what I'm looking at. Curb appeal and then the brick itself. Then you go across the street, maybe not right across the street, but right down the road is Lazaro's building. And that's all brick, isn't it? I mean, that's a good piece of that. Is it? So then my concern becomes, are we being consistent?
So
We made someone do it this way and now we're giving waivers for someone to do it this way.
So one of the things, and I think these are good questions I'd like to ask the petitioner, and also make sure that one decision on one petition does not set precedence for another petition. So something for us to keep in mind. But with that, what have we looked at, have we done before?
Yeah.
So those are good questions I'd ask the commissioners. Let's ask the petitioner.
So is the explanation for not wanting to conform to the UDO on the back of the building is that just that they're not visible?
Yeah, that they're not, yeah, they wouldn't be visible from 36 and they wouldn't be visible from.
Is that an acceptable reason in general? Yeah, well, you can't see it, so we're just not going to follow the ordinance.
And
I do remember we talked about this with the Rise development.
Right.
And we did grant an exception for the buildings that were furthest in the back, but the buildings in the front we had them conform to the ordinance. This is saying all of the buildings, just the back side. So that would be my question, is whether that's reasonable to say you can't see it. So we're not going to follow the ordinance.
Good point. That's something that we need to deliberate on. That's our decision to.
Because they're also asking for the exception for the articulation as well. So there would be metal and no articulation on the back of the building. So it would be completely not conforming to the ordinance or the spirit of it on the backs.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, then we'll ask the petitioner to come forward. And please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name's Ashton Fritz with Fritz Engineering. We're civil engineers representing the developers on this project. I think Bill did a pretty good job analyzing and presenting both the site, the development, and the waivers. As far as the orientation, I think I can touch on that. Because we have three, we'll call them rows of buildings here, and they share drives, we end up with two drives. If we flipped the buildings closest to Kingston, we would need a third drive, and we don't have enough depth in that lot to create another drive for them to access from that side. So what we've done is, as Bill mentioned, added the 100% masonry on that side, parapet on the roof lines, painted colors, and trying to make it as much aesthetically as a front as we can without it functioning as the actual front. Other than that, I don't know if you have anything you want to add right off the bat?
It was just a couple.
Can you state your name and address, please?
Raj Dhaliwal, 16238 Remington Drive, Fishers, Indiana. So on what we had to do was, because the buildings are orientated towards Kingston, so we wanted that to be the more dressed up side, and from any visual from that side, so that's why we put 100% masonry towards Kingston. And those are not just emergency doors. We ended up putting storefronts with side lights to give it kind of a plaza type look, even though it is just technically the rear exit of that building towards Kingston. And then as you drive in, we wanted it to be 100% masonry. We were technically allowed in the tier to do a lower portion, and we could have used a cheaper material, but we just went ahead and wanted to go with the 100% masonry and 100% brick. We, in order to, like the other example, you had the question of trying to differentiate and use colors and paint, and that's what we've done. We've got a couple examples. We're not married to those, but those are ones that our designer had picked out of, I don't know, Benjamin Moore or Sherman Williams to match with each. So the trim colors are the border, and then the brick is the color that it would be painted. There's 4 different colors to just kind of really differentiate the different units and kind of give it like more looks like a townhouse kind of a feel. And we also have these modern canopies. We do have a picture. We added those, and we added the parapets. And I just wanted to, it's not an argumentative thing, but the Lazaro building does have the same metal panels that we're proposing. And I believe it's 50% or 40%. I don't know the exact number, but it's quite a bit of the same material if you guys wanted. So the whole intent was it's really visible from Kingston. And as you drive in, our tenants' spaces, they'll be visible from that. So we really want to address that up. So as you come in, it's 100% masonry on all those facades. On the front 2 buildings, on the sides, I believe we went, do you know the percentage? 30% on the sides to comply with that. So the intent was to comply with the ordinance. It's just that we're orientated towards Kingston and not really towards US 36. And we're 600 feet back. There's an enterprise rental. I want to say it's 50 to 60% of that is this way. But then we have a thinner field that goes that would be this side that heads towards US 36, and we fully expect that to be developed. And we don't expect there to be a view from that angle. We wanted to spend our money on where our tenants and our traveling public would see. So I can take any questions you like.
Questions for the petitioner?
I have a question. The masonry material, what is that?
It's 100% brick, and I want, just to clarify, that's thin brick, that's just so you can carry it around. It'll be a full queen-size brick.
Okay, so in the picture that's circulating, what material is that?
That is metal, but that's for the canopies.
Oh, you're showing the canopy.
That's just the canopies we're adding.
You're trying to show it the canopy, okay.
Yeah.
Is it what
So
you
there's
like- to me
canopies
like
to
fiber
bring,
cement board
yeah.
underneath that,
Yeah.
but that's what you're doing.
Yeah, canopies to bring it, in and out, and the colors, and then the parapets. So, and again, on a smaller scale, this is industrial space. So it's kind of like the other things, but you're trying to maximize the space, and that's, yeah.
To follow up on Dave's question about the awning, so looking at the building faces to the south that are along Kingston, again, this is just, I know, like a high-level rendering, but do you plan on having sidewalks leading from those? Again, I know they're not the main entrances, but they're a back entrance. Do you plan on having sidewalks that lead from those doors to the sidewalk, or is it just going to be a door, grass, and then a sidewalk?
So I believe there's the sidewalks that are drawn, there's a sidewalk along Kingston, and there's, sidewalks that go into the park to interconnect everything. We could have them out to Kingston if that's what the planning commission wants. Those are mostly like the exit stoop, but we did put storefront there to make it appear, and then we did put canopies over those to kind of enrich the look, I guess.
Got it. And then to the north, those two buildings to the north, again, that metal paneling, is it going to be painted gray? Is it going to look like metal paneling, or is it going to look like?
It's a neutral color. It should just kind of blend away, kind of like the Lazaro building, and and another point to just note is those first two buildings, those are 100% brick on both the front and the rear facade, because we didn't want those tenants to have a different face than the other ones. So, so the first ones you see are almost 100% brick. It'd be 60% of the sides that are paneled, but all the other ones, but yeah, so there's a lot of masonry there. I think we counted like 200,000 bricks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I heard it or I understood. The canopies then are going to go on the south buildings that face Kingston? That's
Yes.
where you're putting your canopies?
Yes, on all the entryways. They'll also be in the interior of the park, but definitely towards Kingston as well. And we have glass storefront. I believe it's 72, like 7 feet wide or so. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
There's one thing I would like to add as far as the visibility from the north. The northwest building there, so the top right corner there is an existing 5 to 6 foot berm that separates this property from the property to the north. And it has significant existing vegetation on it. As part of our plan, we're going to add some on our side per the requirements, but that berm extends about 60% across the back of our property, and then it tapers back down to existing grade. And then the undeveloped part there that's just north of the northeast building also has some pretty good vegetation on it currently. It's vacant, undeveloped, but as far as visibility from 36, it'll be, if you can see it, it'll be very, very limited.
But that's in your lot, or is that vegetation in the vacant lot adjacent?
Both. And we're keeping as much as we can. We have some grading that we're doing up there, but as much as we can, we will keep on our side. Mhm.
All right. Any other questions for the petitioner? All right. At this time, we'll open up public comment at 8 o'clock.
No one signed up for this petition.
Okay, no one signed up. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up and talk to this petition? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment at 8 o'clock. Deliberations by the commission.
for me, I would be interested in seeing more design improvements to the south face of the southern buildings, because again, it's butting up against Kingston. To Greg's point, like it needs to have that curb appeal. So whether it's, you know, giving it the appearance of the main entrance when it's not, at least would, I think, again, if they're seeking a waiver to deviate from the DO, this could be something that would, again, support the waiver of, you know, it's improving. It's still enhancing what the spirit of the rule entails. But for me, that's at least one thing I'd like to see.
So this, I think about this when we do developments on 36, and Chick-fil-A is a good one, where the front is not facing 36, where our standards call for a store frontage to be facing 36. So they build to give it an appearance of a storefront. And that's for what we're seeing go in Kingston. We get a design difference with the color scheme and the materials. It doesn't have the sidewalks leading to the sidewalk, which when you made that comment, it made me think about that. Well, is that something we ought to ask for? And on the other hand, it may draw walk-up traffic to a door that's not intended to be ingress, egress on a regular basis. You know, so is it better served by storefront, or is it better served maybe by landscaping? Or is it really, I feel like it's meeting the intent there. That's my opinion.
I kind of agree with Mason. I want the curb appeal. I want people to go by and look at it. It sounds like they have some issues with the size of the lot. That's the way they're presenting it. But to me, it's like the front door to your house. It's the entryway in. And then on the back buildings, you know, the metal, today there's nobody there, and someone else will build there. And I get it as it sits today. That's really not being seen by anybody from Kingston Street. The only way you're going to see it is from 36. But at some point in time, somebody wants to build something there, and now they see it. So I think in my mind, I'm thinking, I got to think ahead to that person. I may not be here. I don't know who it is, but you want to look out your window and go, oh, that's my neighbor. So.
So we have waiver A, request to allow for use of canopies and unit colors in place of articulation. Kind of talk about that. Waiver B, request to allow relief from 2 different materials on building facades. Waiver C, request to allow use of metal panels and masonry on building facades. And waiver D, request to allow modification of masonry percentages on building facades. So maybe working through these on waiver A, any other comments specific to waiver A?
So these canopies that they're asking for a waiver on are throughout the whole project on all 6 of these buildings and the unit colors, correct? And some of these canopies then are going to be on the south 2 buildings.
So if the petitioner come up and just the canopies, are they on all doors on all sides?
On all sides, interior and exterior towards Kingston.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse, but if there is a desire by the commission to request or seek a modification to some aspect of their proposal, what is the best waiver to attach that to? Or maybe, Dan, I mean, it would seem we would want to put apples with apples. So if there is a specific request that we do have, we'd want to necessarily tie it with a waiver, right?
Right, I mean, if you're concerned about that, the steel north wall, and that only relates to C, waiver C. And so like waiver A is just canopies and unit colors in lieu of articulation. So that's what A is. And B is a relief from two different materials on the building facades and to allow them to use two different colors of the same material instead of two different materials. And then D is the modification of the masonry percentages on the facades again. But I think C is the one you discussed the most.
The steel, right.
It doesn't preclude you from, and you can also, you can ask for commitments on these waivers, or you can impose conditions. So you have those options. If they're, for example, like the sidewalk issue you talked about, that would relate to A, you ask B, because that's wouldn't relate to the others so much, but maybe A. You can ask the petitioner if they would do that voluntarily. That may sway your vote on A. That's something you could ask.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So then I wonder, like, if there's, yes, for me, I would be interested in seeing if they could come back either in the form of a commitment, or we continue the waiver A to see if they could improve the curb appeal. And then if the commission has questions or concerns about C, then the same. But if there are waivers that we feel like we can't approve tonight, then let's approve those waivers. And can we do that?
Wow.
Approve some waivers and continue others?
If you're going to continue, I would not. I think those are all design oriented, and you might want to see them all together. Even, for example, even if the, so much of what you're talking about, I'll use our aesthetic, dressing up the front southern facades and changing the northern facade and sidewalks and curb appeal. Those things are all, that is the solutions that may be in the eye of the designer, and maybe, we should leave those to the designer. But if you want them to make another run at it, it might be better to do it comprehensively all together, it seems to me. You could tell the petitioner what you think about the other waivers, but to assist in that design process, if that's the way the commission wants to go. But I think that's about as far as I'd go.
Right, thanks.
For me, I'm looking at it, trying to decide whether I think that painting one material, different colors, replaces articulation and two materials. Isn't it like 80% masonry, I think, is the requirement, 20% a different material? And so they're flattening it out. So it just doesn't look as interesting to me when it's flattened out. So again, that kind of, yeah, there's a little bit subjective.
I think at the end of the day, it's what do we want to see? It's our community. We'll drive by it. I mean, I like the concept. I like the idea of, moving them out of garages and basements and moving them into that. Now, we do have the one on Ronald Reagan Rise that we've done. But at the end of the day, we're the town and we want to have pride of ownership. I always say it. Something gets built, they move on to the next project. We live here and we go by it every day and we see it every day. So let's approve it the way we want to see it. And if there's any issues that they can't because of the size of the lot, or, I mean, that they may need to go back and buy more land. I don't know, to make it work. But when I drive down Kingston, I mean, I've been here a long time and I fought to get that road put in through there. And we've got it through there. And I want people to go down there and go, oh, I like that site. They did a good job of planning that. So that's just me.
So I think the development is a good development for this location. But I would agree that it needs to be built to the standards that we agree on. And I guess I want to make sure, get to where the commission stands on this, because if we are leaning towards continuing it and asking for commitments or conditions that we want to give the petitioner, we want to be clear on and give feedback to the petitioner then on what our expectations are and not be vague, so they can go in and meet those expectations. So we're, again, I'm not calling a vote. I'm just asking, are we leaning towards wanting to continue this and giving the petitioner feedback?
I always look at, there's give and take in waivers. And I don't know what is a good number of waivers and what's an excessive number of waivers, but we've got 4 waivers. And I think we're giving more than we're receiving. So I would, and like I said, I like the project. I would like to see the fronts flipped on Kingston. I would like to see the buildings turned around.
You know, like to see the storefront face Kingston.
Yep.
If I may, the purpose of not putting the fronts towards Kingston was to not have the overhead doors, because it was one of the UDO exceptions to not have the overhead doors. So that was the intent of putting that storefront look over there and not having the overhead doors facing Kingston.
Thank you.
What size of those doors do we know? When you say overhead,
They're 14 by 14.
a big garage door then, I guess.
Yeah.
I think a regular door is like a two-door garage would be, I think, 14 by 8.
So yeah, to your point, Paul, I think, yeah, if we want to see if the petitioner is open to seeking a continuance, us being clear as to what we would like to see in the next petition, assuming they're open to a continuance. So for me, it's about curb appeal and making sure that that look on the north side is either compliant or gives the appearance of compliance for future developments.
So we've said the frontage on Kingston Street needs to either have storefront, or I'm going to go and a better appearance of a storefront on Kingston Street, because I'm not sure I would want big garage doors facing Kingston Street, having another street there. But if they could represent a better storefront than what we see today, that would give it a better appearance. It'd meet the intent of what you're talking about, Greg. And then the one you were just talking about.
The north face. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate what they're sharing about like vegetation and whatnot. But again, with winter and again, not knowing who the subsequent property owner is there something more they can do to enhance that north side other than just the metal sheeting? And then again, maybe they could bring in an example of the exact, what that's going to exactly look like.
Good point there, because when they talked about the vegetation, it wasn't on their property, so it's only as good until that property gets developed. The other thing is, like with the 4 waivers, it's like giving up a lot of the masonry. I think, Dave, that's where you were talking about that. I'd like to see maybe closer to the development standards.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'd ask the petitioner if he'd come up to the podium. We haven't voted, but the discussion here is leaning towards perhaps not approving the waivers, which would then have an impact on the DPR. So we are leaning towards allowing a continuance if you are open to that.
We are open to that. We did try to meet with Bill and get his input in and try and comply. And this was our good faith effort in trying to do that. The engineer did pull up a closer picture so you can get an image of the storefronts that are there right now.
Do you have another development that if you decide to continue this, that I could drive by later on and look at it?
We currently have other ones that they were not, we're building this the first time. And our business model is totally different than the RISE concept. This would be somebody who has their own office and their own bathroom and their own unit, whereas they have kind of a community office, co-working type environment. And I know that the gentleman and their materials, were much cheaper quality. We tried to do more here. I mean, even on the front, we went 100% on most of the facades, and the intent is we're trying to do more. We're not trying to,
Thank you.
just build something cheap and move on.
So do you have any questions of us, or did you hear our comments and take that away, or do you need any more information?
I think what would work well was we'll have another meeting with Bill, and then we'll go over these comments and make some changes, I guess.
If we continued it to the next meeting, would that give you enough time to make the design change, or do you
Yes.
need more than a month?
Yes.
Next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So, like I heard sidewalks, some more storefront, but that gives you a better image of what we did put on Kingston. Yeah, and
I think when we talk about storefront, it's more than just looking at the back of a building.
Yeah.
It has some sort of curb appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
I think as far as material too, I don't think it's just about durability. It's also about aesthetics.
Yes.
So it's a combination of things.
Mhm. Yeah, our intent was to use brick as a heavier material, or, yeah.
And I appreciate that. Okay. Any other comments?
I'll just agree with everyone else. I do think this is a good location for this kind of a business. So
Pardon?
I think it's a good location for this.
Yeah,
kind of
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of small businesses that, that I guess you grow out of your garage, and your wife wants to work vans out of the garage. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And then the problem we have as a town is once they outgrow that, do we have a 50,000 square foot building somewhere that they can go into versus going to a neighboring community? So
Yeah.
we want to cultivate them, we want to grow them, and
Mhm.
we want to retain them as well.
Yeah, and we did do a lot of talking back and forth, and we eliminated any outdoor storage, so there's no outdoor storage. Their businesses are confined in the units, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, is there any other comments or discussion among the commission? Somebody like to make a motion?
I would move that we grant a continuance for DPR 2310 Avon Business Park. Is that the correct one? Thank you. Until the next planning commission meeting on Monday, July 24th.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
Or
Motion carries. The petition is continued to the next
Want
meeting.
this back, or I can keep it, or
You're welcome to keep it if you want.
do we have one this size?
I think we don't have that entire packet, 11 by 17.
Okay. If we could have, next time we get to see it, or I can keep it, I'll keep it.
You're welcome to keep it.
Okay.
That's just a printed copy.
Okay.
Stack.
I'll keep it then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to MAPP 2305.
MAPP 2305 Kingsway Christian School, primary plat, request for a major subdivision primary plat to develop school. It's a 31-acre property located at about 5706 East County Road 100 North. This first petition is the subdivision of the land. There's a second petition on this agenda that deals with the actual development of the second lot of this subdivision. As I said, it's a subdivision primary plat to develop, ultimately to develop a school on the site. There's no real history on the site. The site is zoned R1, and it is improved with a religious use, a church right down here. And I believe that this is a parsonage associated with the church, or a single family dwelling that's associated with the church. The vast majority of the property right here is in an undeveloped state. As you can see, the corporate limits of the town are right about here, and then this is in the county's area, and it's single-family residential over in this area. To the west is a park, Washington Township Park, and south, I believe, is residential. Subdividing 31 acres into 2 lots. The first lot would be around the existing religious use for the retention of the existing church. And then to construct a private school on the second lot. The development is, plan is pending for the school, and it's coming up right after this petition. And the request for the subdivision part of this request is consistent with the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance. And this shows the breakdown of the two lots. So this is the first lot right here, has existing church property on it. And then this is the second lot right here, which is a prospective lot for the school. We do recommend approval of this primary plat, subject to 3 conditions, and those are the 3 conditions standard for a primary plat. Revised plans comply with all commitments and conditions noted as a part of any approval granted. Project received any necessary review and approval from Crossroad Engineers on behalf of the town, the Hendricks County Surveyor's Office, and the Hendricks County Drainage Board if applicable, and that the final plat will comply with all relevant portions of the subdivision control ordinance in the town code. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll ask the petitioner to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Steve Brehob with Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Drive, Plainfield, Indiana. And I'm here this evening joined by Dr. Julie Giordano with Indianapolis Christian Schools, Avon campus, formerly known as Kingsway School. And Andy Hine with Art Design, the project architect, is here with me as well. As Bill had said, we have 2 requests before you this evening. The first one is a subdivision request. It's pretty simple. Subdivide the property into 2 parcels, one around the existing Faith Lutheran Church, and then 1 parcel to be transferred then to the school for construction of a new school. Not a whole lot of razzle dazzle or things to talk about, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for the petitioner? Just ask one. The church that's there is in support of this?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And I will add that though we have 2 petitions here this evening, one doesn't happen without the other. If the property is not subdivided, or the subdivision is not approved, obviously development plan does not move forward, and vice versa.
All right.
That's what I was going to ask. Which one comes first? Do we want the church? And we decline the church, but we do the school? Or, but you just said
The
they both come
subdivision.
together. If you
Yeah.
don't do one, you don't do the other.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Nope. Okay, thank you. We're going to open up for public comment at 8:24.
We have Kevin Westwick.
You'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Kevin Westwick, 6135 Maple Branch Place. I am the vice president of Faith Lutheran Church, and last year we did sign a purchase agreement with ISCCA. And so basically we have a 1-room schoolhouse. Okay, we finished phase 1, and we had 2 phases that were approved about 5 or 6 years ago. And so phase 2 has taken longer than expected because of decreasing members and decreasing income. We don't really need 35 acres. We only need about 10 acres. So what we want to do is sell the 25 acres and get funds to grow our congregation. We feel a K to 8th grade Christian school would be great neighbors for everyone nearby. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
So you're speaking on behalf of the existing church there now?
Correct. And we currently own the property,
Thank you.
31 acres.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Steve Brehob. And then Brady Oring is signed up for the DPR, so we'll wait on that.
So that's it on the MAPP?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to the primary plat? Yes, sir. If you come up, state your name and address.
I'm Brady Oring at 1308 North, sorry, Brady Oring, 1308 North County Road 600 East. This is probably an education thing for me, but the naming of the plat, does that matter for this?
It matters that it has to be unique, but it could be anything. In this particular case, the plat is named, I believe, the Kingsway School primary plat. But it could be changed to anything as long as it doesn't duplicate another subdivision name within Hendricks County, because that becomes the legal description for the piece of property.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else that would like to speak to this petition? Okay, then we'll close public comment at 8:26. And if the petitioner has any comments,
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of address his comment regarding naming of the plat, and the name will probably be changed. The school is going through a rebranding process since they're building their own facility now. So I doubt it would go forward as Kingsway subdivision.
Thank you, because I was going to ask that question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. We've had maybe 5 or so subdivisions that have gone through primary plat approval and then have changed the name of the subdivision when they get the secondary plat approval. So it's not uncommon for that to happen.
all right. So deliberations by the commission.
Just to comment that it's nice to see collaboration among churches and different faiths, and it's good to see that here in our community.
Yes. Any other comments? Again, staff report is pretty good, straightforward. Does anybody like to make a motion?
I move that we approve MAP 23-05 Kingsway Christian School, major subdivision primary plat to subdivide a property to allow for the development of a school, subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting presentation. Since it has satisfied all the requirements for development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Paul Guckenberger.
4.
Bill Reed.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Mason Pike.
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries. Plat is approved. Primary plat.
We will move on to DPR 2311.
DPR 2311, request for approval of development plan review to develop a private school. It's a 31-acre property located at 5706 East County Road 100 North. And here we are talking about the approval of the institutional development plan for this particular school. As you probably guessed, the only there's a DPR for the church on there that I didn't put on here, but the previous petition is the only history other than that DPR. Site right here, school, or the existing church down here. This is a lot that's connected to the church, and then the remainder of the property, about 25 or so acres, going to be developed for a school. Property zoned R1 in a school, private or public, is a permitted use in that primary zoning district. So it's a strange case where churches and schools are permitted by right in a zoning ordinance in a residential zone. That's really just a reflection of the fact that historically churches and schools are considered compatible with residential land uses. The site is not constrained by any secondary zoning districts, whether that's flood control, Ronald Reagan, US 36, or the agricultural overlay. I believe the site is located in the agricultural overlay, but the agricultural overlay is an overlay that only allows agricultural uses on property that's not zoned agriculture. And since we're talking about a religious or a school use here, it isn't applicable. The request that is before you today is consistent with the Unified Development Ordinance. The only real deviation from this plan as compared to our planning documents is that the Avon Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan does show a 10-foot asphalt path along the eastern and northern property lines and terminating at the western property line into the Washington Township Park. The petitioners proposed an alternate alignment, and that is a removal of the existing sidewalk along County Road 100 North and terminating that into the access drive into the park that exists along 100 North right now. We have had discussions with the Washington Township Parks concerning that proposed access drive. Originally, their feedback was that the access drive really wasn't intended for public access, that it was an old driveway that is only being used for maintenance vehicles back into the interior of the park there. But they have changed their mind on that one, and you have the email. I gave you all the email from the Parks Department director indicating that she believes that the alternate is perfectly fine, that she has no objection to the removal of the existing sidewalk and extension of a 10-foot asphalt trail along the frontage of 100 North, rather than moving around the eastern and northern boundaries of this property and teeing into the property to the park's eastern property line. Therefore, because the Washington Township Park director has no objection to the use of that access drive for public access into the park, staff supports the alternative alignment as well. This is the excerpt from the planning document showing the trail that would extend. These are the line of houses. This is really the property of the school and the church. And this was the alignment that was going into the parks, the park, Washington Township Park right here. This right here is a sidewalk. The green dash line is a sidewalk. There is an existing sidewalk here. So what the proposal is instead of moving the trail along that eastern boundary of the park and along the northern boundary of the park and teeing it into the nature park right there, that they just extend the trail along County Road 100 South. And then there's the little access to the park that you see that'll be right in here. So here is the proposal showing the wooded area right around here, potential athletic fields up to the north here. But the main focus of effort right here is the school building that's located right here. And the trail plan would have a trail go across here and tee right into here. Now there's some significant terrain around here. I want to say there's like a 50 or 60 foot hill at this location. And that was the petitioner's comments on routing this trail along here, was how was the access into the park going to be accomplished with the fairly significant terrain challenges that are right here. And the proposal then would be to remove the existing sidewalk right here and put a 10-foot asphalt path all along this frontage right here. And then you'd end up connecting to the park's access drive, which is located just off this thing right about here. These are the elevations of the school. As I said, that the property is not located within any overlay district. So there's just some fairly standard architectural requirements in I think Chapter 8 of the ordinance. And this proposal meets all those architectural requirements. So the sort of basic architectural requirements that everyone would have, every commercial, industrial, or institutional use has to meet in the town are met by these elevations. These elevations, I believe, are the southern elevations and the eastern elevations, if I remember correctly. And then I put the other two elevations right on the next slide right there, just showing you how the school would look. Basically, the first one should be from what you see from County Road 100 North. And then this will be more to the back of the school and to the east or the west of the school. We do recommend approval of this petition, subject to the 5 conditions you see up there. The first condition is just acknowledging the asphalt trail, the 10-foot asphalt trail. An appropriate public access easement shall be incorporated into the development plan and the proposed plat and the adjoining property to the west That's one thing to keep in mind here. That 10-foot asphalt trail would have to go across the parsonage property, which isn't part of the plat or this development plan. So there will be a small chunk of that trail that will have to be constructed on the parsonage property of this of this site. So it's an off-site construction. Along County Road 100 North, replacing the existing sidewalk and connecting it to the existing access drive into Washington Township Park. And then the other 4 conditions are standard conditions that are approvals of development plan review petitions. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Bill, I do have a question on the asphalt path. So do we have the position or the authority to impose that condition on a property that's not part of the DPR?
With the consent of the property owner, we've discussed it. I believe the property owner is consenting to that rather than having to build the trail to the east and to the north, that they prefer to just build the trail to that little chunk of trail rather than build that long trail along the east and north.
Property owner is the church.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So we would get that in writing though.
Yeah, that's
That was a question I had too, if we're going across somebody's property. So it's kind of like getting an easement.
right. That's why I indicated that we need to have the easement either. So there'll be there's additional, I think, 5-foot of right of way dedicated along the frontage of this property. I'm not sure if we could fit the 10-foot trail in that right of way. So they may have to have an access easement for that 10-foot asphalt trail along the frontage of the church, but they would have to dedicate a public access easement on the adjoining piece of property via an instrument number or via an instrument rather than a platting document.
Okay. So as you've written the conditions here, that covers the asphalt path.
Yeah, it's a condition on the approval of the development plan, so there's sort of an incentive to comply.
Yep.
Being that this is a proposal to replace the access trail to the park, when you get to that access drive, would there be a portion of it like delineated for walking or how?
Well, it's really, so this particular park is just mulched trails. It's not like paved trails or something. The existing driveway, I believe, is just a dirt driveway. So
Oh, it's just, okay.
yeah, it's just a dirt driveway that goes up to an old cabin that's back in there.
It'll terminate and get you there, but it won't be linking into a paved surface.
Right, it won't be linking into none of the trails in this particular park are like our asphalt paths. They're all mulched trails.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? With that, then we'll ask the petitioner to come forward. If you'd state your name and address for the record.
Same guy, Steve Brehab, Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Drive, Plainfield, Indiana. And I have the same cast of characters with me as the last one. Bill did a really good job explaining the trail conundrum. It's not that we were, all right. It's not that we were opposed to the trail. It's just we wanted to see it go where it made the most sense. And our concern was running around the backside and then teeing into it at the base of a hill that then no one was going to be able to easily traverse and get into the park. And we thought this made more sense. And I'm glad that everybody has kind of agreed that this is a pretty good compromise to get people to the park. Which is the go button?
Should be the right. There it goes.
So as Bill had explained, the school's parking lot, school parking lot here, they'll be sharing an entry, sharing the existing entry into the Faith Lutheran Church site. And one of the reasons for that is Bill had said he thought that the area to the south was zoned residential. It is. It's the Easton Gray development. It's area E of Easton Gray. And the entry into that portion of the development lines up with the church drive as well. So we won't be having drive after drive after drive all along County Road 100. And there are improvements that will be made to County Road 100 as part of this project. Right now, there's already a left turn lane into the church property, and we'll be creating a dedicated right turn lane into that property as well.
While you're talking about that, and you talked about going up that hill, are there going to be like flashing lights or something? Because once you get the school built, you're going to have a lot more traffic, and that entry is kind of at the base of that hill. So those people can't see coming out what's coming down.
So there was, Steve Moore had made one of the conditions of approval, or one of his conditions, was adding the raised reflector medians all along, or not medians, but raised reflectors all along the center line of the roadway. Because if you go through there at night right now, it's an undeveloped area and it's dark, and you have come down the base of the hill. And there was also a comment that he made about a pedestrian signalized crossing, and that would be part of the project. Here you can see how this driveway lines up with the proposed Eastern Gray development to the south. The plat again. And the building elevations that Bill had showed, but I've got something that I think shows the site and the building a little bit better. Arc Design put this together, and it's a drive-through of the site. And a lot of times you see building renderings and they just kind of place it on a generic site and put some trees and shrubs on it. But Arc did a fantastic job on this. They actually took the proposed site plan from the construction plans, the proposed landscape plan, and turned it into a drive-through. And I think it gives you a good representation of what the site's going to look like, as well as what the building will look like. If I can get this to play. So this is coming in the entry drive then from the church and turning into the school parking lot, driving up towards the front main entry of the building. You can see parking lot on the left and a smaller staff parking lot on the right. And then this is the main entry into the school building. So a large sidewalk in front for pickup and drop off of students. And the main entry into the building. And again, a long, wide sidewalk for stacking. Around to the north side of the building. And you can see there's a drive that circulates around the building for fire access. So this is heading back south around the building now. Pedestrian sidewalks all the way around the building. Then there's a larger parking lot adjacent to the gymnasium on the south side of the building. That taller portion of the building there is where the gymnasium will be. And then sidewalks connecting through out to what's shown as a sidewalk along County Road 100, but what would be the trail. And I hope that with Bill's presentation, the comments that I've made and this fantastic fly-through that Art Design put together, I hope this answers questions, any questions that you have. I'd be happy to answer any others.
Any questions for the petitioner? None at this time.
Thank you.
We'll open up to public comment at 8:46.
Kevin Westwick, do you wish to speak again?
Sir, if you state your name and address for the record again, please.
Kevin Westwick, 6135 Maple Branch Place. I don't have anything to add unless anybody has any questions.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you.
The other one we have signed up is Brady Oring.
And again, if you'd state your name and address for the record.
Yep. Brady Oring, 1308 North County Road 600 East. I'm actually a neighbor on the northeast side of the property. I'm excited for the project, excited for the new neighbors, potentially. I have a couple of concerns about the project. One of them is regarding if you have the erosion control plan by chance. A lot of efforts in the design and layout, specifically call out the wetland in the middle of the property, which I appreciate that with no intention to touch it.
I don't have it on me, but I
Okay. In any event, there's a wetland. There's like a portion of the field that is specifically, some of it's wooded, some of it's just underlying brush, but it's designated as wetland. And I believe the erosion control plan specifically calls out soil storage both on the north and on the west side. And then on the east side of that wetland is currently a detention pond. So my current understanding is there would be construction on the full south side, a pond on the east, and dirt piles or storage on the north and west side. So limited access for actual animals to move in and out of that wetland unencumbered. So I'd prefer to see more access. There's a creek that actually is run on the north side of that property. If there would not be, ideally, if there was access between the wetland and the creek during the construction time, I think that would help that. The other concern I have is just traffic consideration. So my kids go to River Birch, and I know even on that small of a street, there's just a large amount of increased congestion. And 10th Street in the morning right by here, or sorry, 100 North is just super busy. There's a stop sign currently at 600 East and 100 North. And adding this many cars is what will be to the school. I'm not sure if the town already has plans for that, but it's going to present an issue very quickly as this project moves along. So those are my primary points of concern.
Sir, before you sit down, just make sure I understand the wetlands. Your concern there, could you state that again?
Yeah, so the plans very clearly call out a wetland area that's not to be disturbed. And then I think there's future plans for maybe a softball or baseball diamond also called out. But I believe this project is just the construction of the school. Yeah, I don't know how to show that, but so looking at the plot, the school will be down here. Sorry, this is really poor. There's a wetland area right in the middle, and then potential soil storage on the west side and the north side. And there's another exhibit that calls out a creek that runs along the north side of the property up here. So just access from the wetland to that creek, because there'll be a school down here, there'll be a pond here, all under construction without any actual access for the animals to get in and out of there. It's a concern.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anybody else in the audience that would like to come up and speak on this petition? See none, we'll close public comment at 8:49. Deliberations by the commissions.
I do have a question for staff and Bill. For this type of development, is there what is customary for? Is there I know sometimes based on number of lots or anticipated traffic, then a traffic study is done. Is there a standard threshold when it's this type of development, whether a traffic study is done for like a school or a church?
Yeah, this one had a traffic study done to it, and Steve had reviewed it. Steve and our consultant reviewed it. That's where a lot of the comments that Steve had as far as improvements to 100, that's where they came from.
Got it. Thanks.
Bill, is there any other improvements that we should note for the record here due to Easton Gray? Because that was a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be some capacity improvements along 100 North associated with Easton Gray. Easton Gray, they've just filed the first secondary subdivision request, and it's on the far west side of the Easton Gray right now in the Hopa area. So we're not at that point where we're going to be doing a lot of the improvements on 100 North. I know Public Works is looking at options such as roundabouts and other sorts of things, but I don't know how far along they are in the design of those improvements. But yeah, the town's going to have to do some capacity improvements on 100 North, especially when Easton Gray really takes off, because it's going to put a lot of traffic on 100 North.
What about the wetlands? I mean, can you disturb those wetlands? I mean.
Well, yeah, in the plans, it's a wooded area. Now it's a old ag field, so it probably is a wetlands. I don't know if it's delineated wetlands or not. The area that they show that has the wooded area in it is shown future for athletic fields, softball and baseball and soccer and football type fields. But I don't think that those athletic fields are intended to be constructed with this. I think that's a future plan. But they could mitigate. I mean, if it's a delineated wetlands, there's wetlands mitigation that they could do to that as well.
That was going to be my question is DNR would identify it as a wetland.
Not our issue.
Got it.
And with really all due respect to the concern, neither is traffic at this kind of a hearing on a DPR. The only question is whether it complies with our ordinance. If it's a rezone, then this traffic impact is different, a different analysis. Anyone moving dirt or touching a wet area is going to have to comply with state law, federal law, and our stormwater ordinance. Again, not issues before you tonight. The petitioner is entitled to an approval if they comply. And I would just caution us about not chasing every rabbit that runs past us, because the wetland is a perfect example. It's regulated by federal and state jurisdiction. Is not really our issue at all. And traffic is something that, again, is dealt with way back in the process, not here.
So to that point, so Bill, just the DPR, there's no waivers attached to this. So it's a ministerial act of approving this DPR then.
Yeah. I mean, they've done a really good job of designing it in accordance with the ordinance requirements. And the only real issue we had that the petitioner and I have talked about is the trail connection, how we were going to accommodate the trail connection that's shown in our planning documents. And we've come up with that agreement.
Well, I like the idea of the trail being in the front, just more so from a safety and a security standpoint. When you got people using a trail behind a school and there's nothing else behind there, and then you got a woods and you got the park, you don't know who's lurking. So that makes sense.
Any other comments on DPR? Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve DPR 23-11 Kingsway Christian School, a development plan review to allow for the development of a school subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the June 26, 23 Plan Commission meeting presentation, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Paul Guggenberger.
4.
Bill Reed.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Mason Pike.
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion passes. The development plan is approved 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Any other business? No other business?
I got nothing.
Committee reports? Bill?
I've got some RDC from the last couple of months. In addition to our invoices approval, we've also had 100 South and Dan Jones widening updates and the letter of intent regards East and Gray.
Okay. BZA?
Board of Zoning Appeals had two appeals before them, two variances of development standards. No, one special exception, one variance of development standards. The variance of development standards was for a fence located in a front yard along Kingston Street. That's just in front of a little catty corner of the Kingston Street development you saw. That was approved with the condition that it be a black decorative fence. And there's also a special exception to allow for a gravel parking area on the lot. The lot in question is a trailer truck parking and maintenance facility there. After some deliberations, the Board of Zoning Appeals added a condition that they extend the concrete entrance a bit more and just kept the back half of the parking area as gravel. And that's all we got.
Thank you. And anything from town council? Okay.
Well, I
Anything?
do have one thing. I
Yes.
think it's been asked a couple times. Bill, I don't know if you want to kind of put this on your radar to talk to Ryan, and I'll try to make a point. Setting up a meeting with the town council and the plan commission, so we can kind of have an interaction of a vision, a shared vision. Because this last one was a perfect situation where we've talked about the East and Gray. And I've looked at that, I don't know how many times, and I didn't realize it was coming all the way down to that point right across the street from there. And then we do talk about at 600 and 100, making that into a roundabout. So I think it would behoove us just to sit down and do a work session or even a special session. I don't know how much time we need, but we have work sessions before our council meetings that start at 5:30 we can go to, 5 to 7 before the council meeting, if that would work for everybody. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I do have one thing, just to add, the plan, the town council has requested some amendments to the comprehensive plan. And they have actually budgeted some money for this year and next year to that end. So I have put together a request for proposal to hire a consultant for that. It's probably going to be something where once we've got the proposals in, the qualifications in, we'd want to do some sort of joint committee with the town council and the plan commission to select a consultant to do that. So I just want when Greg had brought that up, it clicked something in my mind that says, yeah, we're working on a comprehensive plan update. And that we're probably going to need the plan commission's assistance, at least in selecting the consultant, and then obviously holding meetings and hearings in support of that effort.
All right. Any other comments?
I do have a question for Bill. So this is all available in the online, correct?
All of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I sent you all that
link.
Well, matter of fact, yeah, Mr. Guckenberger has he's the beta tester of distributing these things electronically. And so when I sent you all that link, if you all got my email, that link would send you to the agenda, and on the agenda,
hyperlinks.
You click on the hyperlinks and it gets you all the information that we send you via paper. In fact, there might be a little bit more because we actually send the whole, all the like 40 sheets and you could zoom in and zoom out of them from that.
Like, would it help, like, if we are ready to make that transition on our own devices, telling staff, don't worry about dropping it off?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could tell us if you
don't get me wrong, I like finding these on my doorstep. When I saw this, I was like, oh my goodness. Like,
Yeah, if you no longer want me to drop those off at your house, Send me an email and I will gladly not drop those off.
Can you
for
send me an email so I have your email and I will
Absolutely.
respond to it? And
Yes.
then you could just,
I'll send a reminder to each of you.
awesome.
See,
You don't have to run in my house anymore.
Okay.
the young man there has been wanting me to do this for a long time, but I'm old and I grasp on to the old way of doing things.
I mean, I still need you to come to my house and tell me that you've emailed it to me, but
So I'm with you that the council should put this in the budget to get everybody a laptop so we can do
Well,
electronically.
I mean, we are looking at doing that. I mean, as we said, Paul is our guinea pig, but we are looking at buying
leave it here.
new laptops, handing down the ones that we currently have, so.
Yep.
We will do that.
Yeah, this is a hand-me-down, it's not new. Before we adjourn, I just want to remind everybody, if you'd stop by, I'm assuming we have to sign the minutes. Is that true?
Yes, thank you very much.
So if you'd come by and sign the minutes on your way out. And any other comments for the good? If not, meeting is adjourned.